Some of my favorite movies are Black Swan, Mulholland Drive, Eyes Wide Shut, Lost in Translation, The Crying Game, Carol. I'm Susan Fetzer, and this is Independent Artist. So I grew up in the small town of Ginter, Pennsylvania. When I was about 3 years old, my mom enrolled me into a pre-professional ballet company. I did that for about 10 years, and that was a huge part of my life. It influenced a lot of who I am today. During that time, I was introduced to a lot of art, but primarily musicals, musical theater, theater in general, when I was about 7. And for the longest time, whether it be on stage or ultimately on screen, I wanted to perform.
She expressed an interest at a really young age, and so we just tried to set her up in every way possible with just exposure, equipment, opportunities, that kind of thing.
It wasn't until I started to watch behind the scenes, how things were made, that I started to understand that there were people sort of orchestrated what we were seeing, whether that be a director, a choreographer, a cinematographer. And in diving into their process and what it was like to create these things, that I was really intrigued by.
What is this? What's happening?
The Germans are attacking.
What?
I know, we weren't expecting them for another 2 days.
But
No time to talk now, Private. We've got to cross no man's land to get to the rest of our troops. Let's go.
There's a wind coming.
A wind?
A strong wind.
Stronger than this.
Oh yes.
I remember that I really wanted to be involved because whenever she would do a project, it was usually with her friends from dance. They would come over and they would sit on the floor in the family room and explore the story that they were building for hours, and they would get started on it, and they would kind of find a way to incorporate all these things that we had in the house, experience the making of films with no resources, just what we had around the house and the creativity of her and her friends. I was very much at the point of, I want to write, direct, choreograph, star in, all of these things. So that was my sort of introduction.
She just identified what she wanted to do, and she continued to work to that. And it was pretty special, and I told her pretty exceptional, because I said, you're going to try different things, you're going to be exposed to different things, you're going to have different interests, but the thing that was consistent throughout and actually played a part in each of those things was film.
As I started to do my own research into different art forms and different content, I realized I had a very specific taste for what I wanted to see. I discovered David Lynch, I discovered Darren Aronofsky, and those were two key influences in shaping my perception of filmmaking, storytelling, and what could be done through the medium of film. You can tell that she's inspired. You can see the inspiration of all these other works and all these other famous directors in the kinds of things that she comes up with and she does. But you can also see how she's taken overarching concepts, new ideas, and brought them into what she's been inspired by in order to make something completely new. So for my senior project in high school, I decided to write, direct, and produce a feature film, and used that to apply to various film schools. My primary choice was Tisch School of the Arts, New York University. That was actually the only school I ever toured, and I was dead set on going there. I did everything. I was involved in everything. I was the top of my class, and I made this feature film. So I was so certain that I would get in, and that it would be everything I wanted it to be.
And she just had in her mind that to be successful, she had to go to NYU Film School. She put together an incredible package, like a video of herself and just like a wonderful like portfolio, and just uploaded that all to their portal. And so when that rejection letter came, she was devastated. Like end of the world devastated. Like she didn't want to do film, she didn't want to go to school, she didn't want to do anything. She just shut down.
And that was one of the biggest blows to not only my ego, but my idea of control over where my life was going and how I wanted it to be. My mom had applied to different schools on my behalf for me because while I sort of put all my eggs into one basket, she wanted me to have a backup plan. I've always hated the idea of backup plans. I think that takes away from plan A. But thank God she did, because I ended up getting accepted to FIT, the Fashion Institute of Technology. And at first I wasn't interested. I was like, why the hell would I want to go to a fashion school? Doesn't seem like anything. I knew I wanted to go to New York. And so I went and absolutely loved it. It was a fantastic experience. The people that I met during that time were so incredible, and I learned so much.
Susan and I met when I was in college. She was just getting out of college, and we met in like the town over from where she was living, where I was living in my apartment with my college roommates. My first impressions of her were that she was smaller in person. She seemed happy, and that she like had herself together in like a personality way. She knew what she wanted, and she knew what she was like seeking.
Living in a small town, it was overwhelmingly conservative. I grew up a devout Catholic. A lot of my interests and a lot of what I was drawn to clashed with what I was raised to view as acceptable. Everyone knows everyone, and everyone's parents know everyone. To be someone who's different is hard enough. To be friends with someone who's different is not as hard, but still comes with its own disapproval, and you see everything building upon itself to where people who dare to be different or express themselves differently are met with a ton of backlash. It's really a horrible thing to see, and you see people who feel like they have to leave in order to live the life they want to live, which I think is unfortunate. And on top of this, I had struggled my whole life with my sexuality. So these were things that, as a budding artist, I wanted to express but felt difficulty in doing so.
I believe that Susan started here as the authentic Susan. She went through what all young people go through, which is, looking a certain way, dressing a certain way, behaving a certain way, belonging to certain activities, through school and that kind of thing. And that was not Susan. That was somebody else. She was still in her place, in her mind, doing her things behind the scenes. But as far as like the way she presented, she modified that to what she thought the expectations were. And then she came out again on the other end, goes to New York, and becomes Susan again.
And that's where I really started to find my voice as a filmmaker, as a storyteller. I really started to take risks in terms of what I was putting out there, try and discover my own style and figure out the kind of stories that I wanted to tell.
Fucked up Johnny is?
Yeah, he told me something really weird last week.
What?
You stupid cunt!
Cunt was a collaborative group effort. I think it was some sort of prompt from a professor in film school. We wanted to do something stylized and abrupt. Being that the goal of a photographer is often to create a portrait of someone else, I thought it would be interesting to see a quote-unquote portrait of the photographer. So it's kind of like this vignette sort of overlay montage of her day. It's a warped sense of time.
I remember when we first got together, and I Googled her name and I found her Vimeo. And there was something that she made during COVID. It was just like a teaser like thing. And she put like voicemails over it and like had like herself in front of a different version of herself. I don't know. I'm not a film person. I don't know how to explain it, but I remember that being like the coolest thing that she's ever made, and still like to this day.
My decision to refrain from dialogue and incorporate music is something that shows up in a lot of my work. Personally, when I listen to music, I'm not listening to lyrics. I'm listening to the sounds of what I'm hearing. I'm less interested in the specific dialogue and what is being said, and more the feeling that is conveyed. Growing up, she was the director to me, and she's always like kind of had that personality in her. So like to work with her as a director on her own projects wasn't really anything unfamiliar. Just the same person I've always known in a more professional setting. It always felt really comfortable. I was playing around with freeze frame in this exercise. One of my favorite scenes of all time is the photography scene in The Parent Trap. The implementation of freeze frame in that I thought worked so well, especially when it's a portrait of someone or something. I think freeze frame is a very interesting tool to utilize. Triangle, Circle, Square was another prompted project, and the idea behind that was to go out and find various objects and things that were triangular, circular, or squarical. I kind of took it in a different direction, and rather than go out and film a slice of pizza, I liked the sort of challenge of creating those shapes myself and having it look the way I wanted it to look.
Your lovely eyes made my life romantic when you took advantage of me.
Take advantage of me. I had moved home with my mom after college during the pandemic, and it had been about a year since I made anything. So that was a collaborative effort between me, my friend Des, and their partner at the time, Rory, all of whom are featured in the short. And we were, once again, using what we had and just wanted to make something that spoke to us. That's another one that tells a story. You know, there's a letter that was a letter that I had penned that was very personal and emotional for me, and I sort of took the emotion from that and put it into the work as a whole and made something that it encompassed what I was feeling.
You're still here. Nobody wants you here. You're playing a dangerous game here. If you're trying to blackmail me, it's not gonna work.
Sylvia North Story is actually the title of the film being made in David Lynch's Mulholland Drive. And I sort of took that idea and ran with it, put my own spin on it, and took it in a different direction.
Folks may think I seem a sort of idle dreamer, yearning for the things I never get.
Room 314, that was straight out of the Silent Muse script. That was a very specific moment from the script, and I wanted to try my hand at shooting. Oldies music, for me, is very idealistic. There's a definite tone in that I find simultaneously unsettling and comforting. Silencio was actually something a bit different. During this time, the Me Too movement was going on, and everything with Harvey Weinstein was happening. La Vie en Rose was something that I had watched during that time that I think was probably very influential. And I thought that it would be an interesting take on it to have a man sort of in drag singing one of her songs that was reminiscent of her, but not completely her, and a little more unsettling. I was going for more of an unsettling tone. That was on my mind when making Silencio.
I really only take pictures of people that I find interesting, that I find compelling. Chances are, if you ask me to take your picture, that'll be the thing that makes me not want to shoot you. Some
The
people
kernel of the
especially.
idea for Silent Muse came about when my mom and my uncle had picked me up to go home for winter break. Before heading home, we made a stop at a hotel and got a drink in the lobby bar, where I saw a woman that I perceived to be a prostitute being led away by an older man. And the feeling came over me that I just really wanted to help her, to save her. After that experience, I then made the first Silent Muse. What I was going for was impactful and visceral. That was the starting point for what Silent Muse then evolved to become eventually, incorporating freeze frame again as well, black and white, monologue, music, montage. These are all things that are recurring themes in my work that I sort of leaned into. So for the past couple years, I've been working with Reading Film Studios. They gave me the opportunity to shoot a sort of proof of concept trailer for Silent Muse that, along with the ultimately finished script, is what I hope to present to potential producers, production companies, studios, as, look, here's this idea, here's what it might look like.
Our first night we spent a lot of time talking, and I feel like her specific script that she's been working on in most recent years, like that's what she discussed a lot. And she talked about her time in New York and like how her life came to where she's at now. It didn't make a lot of sense to me, but because I come from like a family that it's like, if you go to school for art, you're stupid, you're never gonna make money. So she opened me up to a new idea of like actually doing stuff that you wanna do rather than doing something that you can live off of.
That has been my primary focus for the last bit of time, but ultimately it just needs to get done. It needs to be put out, and I'm very excited to see where it ultimately goes as a story.